There are times when the world we know cracks open, showing us things we can't explain. The stories you're about to hear happened to real people who lived through them. But what they saw changed their lives forever. After hearing their stories, you might see your own world differently too. These aren't made-up tales or internet stories. These are real people telling us what happened to them. Listen carefully, because what they saw might be watching you right now. Shadows in the dark. Here's what happened to Jake Turner, 28, who worked with computers in Boston. After his wife left him, he bought an old house for a really good price. Too good, as he'd soon find out. The 3-story brick house sat at the end of a quiet street, with huge old oak trees all around it. Like many old houses, it had stories. But Jake would learn why the last family ran away in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. Let me share Jake's scary story in his own words. The first thing that hit me about the house was how quiet it was. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you get in a normal neighborhood, but a heavy silence, like the air was holding its breath. Lisa, the real estate agent, kept talking about the house's special features during the tour. She said stuff like, "Old houses make noise," and "doors might close by themselves because the floor isn't even." I noticed she wouldn't go into rooms first. She'd always let me walk in before her. The last family left in a hurry. That was clear. Coffee cups still sat on kitchen counters. Family pictures hung on walls. A kid's teddy bear lay on a window seat, covered in dust. When I asked about it, Lisa's smile dropped for a second. "Family emergency," she said quickly. "Had to move far away suddenly. That's why the price is so low." I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why nobody came back for their stuff. Should have noticed how the shadows in some rooms looked darker than they should, and how they sometimes moved when nothing was moving. But the price was too good to pass up. After my divorce took almost everything, this felt like my chance to start over. Sarah, my ex-wife, used to handle all the house stuff. Without her, I felt lost. This house, with its solid walls and history, felt like something I could hold on to. The first week was pretty normal. Just little things I could explain away. My coffee cup would be in a different spot than where I left it. My keys would be on a different hook. My laptop would be closed when I was sure I'd left it open. I'd feel cold spots in rooms even with the heat on full blast. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps upstairs when I was working downstairs alone. My home office was in what used to be a kid's room. The old owners had painted stars on the ceiling, real ones, like a map of the sky. But something about them felt wrong. When I wasn't looking right at them, they seemed to move, making new patterns. Late at night while working, I'd see new stars appear, making shapes that definitely weren't normal. Then the knocking started. It always came at exactly 3:17 a.m. 3 loud knocks, like someone hitting the wall with their fist. The first night, it came from my bedroom wall, the outside wall, 3 floors up. I jumped up to look outside, my heart racing. But the big oak tree was way too far to reach the house. There was no way anyone could be out there. I barely slept that night. I told myself it must have been a bird or maybe a branch falling. But the next night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., 3 knocks came from inside my closet. I ran to open it, turning on the light. Nothing but my clothes and some boxes. I even pulled everything out, checking for loose boards or hidden spots. Found nothing. The third night, the knocks came from under my bed. The fourth night, from right behind my headboard. Each night, the knocking got closer to where I slept. My work started getting bad. I couldn't focus during video meetings. I kept seeing things move out of the corner of my eye. My coworkers said I looked tired, jumpy, My boss, Monica, even told me to take some time off. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said during one call. She had no idea how right she was. I started sleeping with the lights on, put security cameras in every room, even had a young priest, Father Mike, come bless the house, though I'd never been religious before. The moment he walked in, he looked worried. "Something's not right here," he said, standing in the front hall. "The air feels wrong." After he blessed the house, he told me to find someone who knew more about these kinds of things. "What kinds of things?" I asked. He wouldn't look at me when he answered. "Sometimes places hold on to bad things. Sometimes they draw in things that were never human to begin with." Nothing helped. The cameras would go fuzzy at weird times, showing snow or twisted pictures. Sometimes they'd catch dark shapes peeking around corners, ducking away just as I turned to look. And the shadows. God, the shadows. I first noticed something wrong with my shadow one morning while brushing my teeth. Half asleep and dreading another day of weird noises, I looked in the mirror. My shadow on the wall moved a split second after I did. Just a tiny delay, but enough to make my blood run cold. I spent the next hour making random moves, watching my shadow lag behind. Sometimes it would catch up, moving exactly with me until I relaxed, then fall behind again, like it was playing with me. That's when I started writing everything down, used my phone to film my shadow moving wrong, put cameras in every room to record all day and night, made lists of when the knocking happened and when rooms got cold. My ex used to say, I got obsessed when stressed. Turning everything into lists and charts helped me feel more in control. But what I found only made things worse. The videos showed my shadow moving differently than me, turning its head when I was standing still, reaching out when my arms were down. In one really scary video, I was typing at my desk while my shadow on the wall slowly turned to face the camera and smiled. The cold spots in the house showed a pattern too. Every room would drop by exactly 17 degrees before something weird happened. The knocks always came at 3:17 a.m. My shadow would freeze for exactly 17 seconds. Even the last family had lived here for exactly 17 months before they disappeared. I went to the town library to look up the house's history. The old librarian, Mrs. Chen, turned white when I told her my address. "That place," she whispered, her hands shaking as she pulled out old newspapers. "Bad things happen there, every 17 years. The old papers told a scary story. Every 17 years since the house was built in 1901, people had vanished without a trace. The police never found anything. The houses next door had been torn down and built again, but this one stayed the same, never aging despite how old it was. "Something lives there," Mrs. Chen said, looking over her shoulder like she was scared someone might hear. "Something old, something hungry. It doesn't want the house, it wants the people inside." That night, I woke up to find all the power out. No street lights outside, no light anywhere. Just pure darkness. And in that darkness, I heard it, not knocking this time, but whispering. "We've been waiting so long," it said in a voice that sounded like dead leaves scraping on concrete. "So long since someone could see us." I tried to grab my phone, but I couldn't move. Not like when you're half asleep and frozen. Something was holding me down. Cold, strong hands gripped my wrists and ankles. More hands pressed against my chest, leaving spots that felt burned by ice. 17 people watched us," the voice said, now coming from all around me. 17 times we waited, and you're the first to record us, so Carefully. The darkness moved. That's the only way I can explain it. Like a darker shadow flowing through the already pitch-black room. As my eyes got used to the dark, I started to see shapes in it. Faces, bodies, all the missing people from over the years, but wrong somehow, twisted up, their eyes just empty black holes. "Your ex-wife was right about you," another voice said. This one making my blood freeze because it sounded just like my mom. She died during my divorce, and losing both of them is what pushed me to buy this house. Always needing to understand everything, always wanting proof. Let us show you what we are. Let us make you understand. Then my shadow peeled itself off the wall. It moved like black smoke at first, then took shape. A darker version of me, but wrong. Too tall, too skinny, with fingers like needles and a mouth that opened way too wide. Behind it, more shadows were coming out of every dark corner of the room. "Look what we've kept," my shadow said, pointing to the twisted shapes swirling in the darkness. Each one tried to prove we were real. Each one tried to show we exist. And now they're part of us forever. It leaned down, its face inches from mine. Inside its mouth was an endless, empty space filled with swirling colors that shouldn't exist. In those colors, I saw how they saw the world. Time wasn't straight for them. Past, present, and future all happened at once. They lived in the spaces between moments, feeding on people who noticed them, getting stronger each time someone tried to prove they were real. "Your cameras caught us," it said. "Your notes tracked our patterns. Your research found our timing. Such nice, careful work. Now you can help us watch everything." From the inside. The cold hands started pulling me down. I could feel myself sinking into my mattress, the darkness starting to swallow me. The shadow thing reached for my face with those needle fingers, and I saw myself in its empty eyes, saw my body starting to twist and change like all the others. That's when I heard real knocking. My neighbor Tom banging on my front door. He'd seen all my lights go out and my car in the driveway. He knew I worked from home and always kept some lights on. Even at 3 in the morning, he could tell something wasn't right. The shadows scattered like roaches when he broke down the door, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. But they didn't go far. I could see them pooling in the corners, bunching up in anger, dozens of twisted faces forming and melting away in the dark. "Jesus, Jake, you're freezing," Tom said when he found me. Later, the thermometer in my room showed 17 degrees below zero in the middle of August. I stayed at his house that night while police checked mine. They found nothing, of course, just my crazy notes, the videos showing what looked like normal shadows, and temperatures that were back to normal. The cops suggested I was working too hard, seeing things because of stress. But Tom's wife, Jenny, worked at the county records office and did some digging. Every 17 years, like clockwork, something happened at my house. Not just people going missing. Weird things reported by neighbors. Lights moving inside when no one was home. Voices calling out to people walking by. Dark shapes standing in windows. The people who lived there before me, their stories matched mine. The family before me had a teenage son who wrote down everything about dark shapes watching him. Before them, an old man filled notebooks with pictures of impossible things he saw in mirrors. A teacher in the 1970s put up cameras and machines to track cold spots and strange sounds. All of them tried to prove what was happening. All of them vanished after exactly 17 months. I sold the house the next day, lost a ton of money but didn't care. Moved across the country, got a new job, tried to forget. But they followed me. The shadows in my new apartment don't move right. My security cameras catch quick looks at twisted faces. Every night at 3:17 a.m., no matter where I am, I hear 3 knocks. Sometimes I catch my reflection grinning at me in windows or my phone screen. Sometimes I hear my mom's voice calling from dark rooms and my own shadow. It's not mine anymore. Last week I got a package. No return address, just my name written in handwriting that looked like mine, but wrong somehow, like someone with really long fingers had tried to copy it. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "Your videos missed some things. We're helping you finish them." The drive had videos from my old security cameras, but not ones I remembered taking. They showed me sleeping, while a darker version of me stood over the bed, reaching down with needle fingers. They showed me working at my desk, while faces pushed out from the walls behind me, their mouths open in silent screams. They showed me eating, showering, living my normal life, while things that weren't human copied my moves in every shadow. The last video was dated 17 months from when I first moved in. It showed what would have happened if Tom hadn't knocked that night. I can't describe what I saw. Won't describe it. But now I understand why no one ever screamed when they disappeared. Yesterday, I got a text from a number with exactly 17 digits. "Miss your old house? Don't worry, we're bringing it to you. 17 days until we finish what we started." The shadows in my room are getting darker, longer, more alive. My cameras catch quick looks at the missing people from that house over the years, their bodies all twisted wrong, their eyes just empty black holes. They're all watching me, waiting, and my shadow. It doesn't follow me at all anymore. It leads. Moving to a new story, the music box. Let me tell you about Sarah Miller, a 31-year-old who worked at the Chicago History Museum. She knew all about old things, but she never expected an old music box to turn her life into a nightmare. Here's Sarah's scary story in her own words. Working with old things, you get a feeling for objects that carry more than just history. Every scratch, every worn spot tells a story. But some things hold darker stories, stories they want to share. I found the music box at an old house sale, one of those huge old houses filled with stuff passed down through families. It sat alone on a shelf in the library. It was beautiful, dark wood with carved roses and brass pieces that had turned almost black with age. The kind of thing that belonged in my museum, not sitting in someone's house collecting dust. The old woman running the sale, Mrs. Fletcher, acted weird when I asked about it. Her hands shook as she picked it up. "It was my grandmother's," she whispered, her voice so quiet I could barely hear her. "Been in the family since 1887. It wants someone new to take care of it." She almost pushed it into my hands. "Take it, please, no charge." That should have been my first warning sign. In 15 years of collecting old things, I'd never seen anyone so desperate to give away something so valuable. "Are you sure?" I asked. "This could be worth thousands." Her eyes darted around the room, never looking straight at me. "Money doesn't matter. It just needs to go. Today. Now." She pushed it into my hands. "But be careful of the song. Don't listen too long." I noticed her hands were covered in tiny cuts, like paper cuts. When I asked about them, she just shook her head and walked away fast, muttering what sounded like a prayer. The music box was heavier than it looked, and ice cold even on that hot summer day. The brass key was still in the lock, matching the roses carved in the wood. But something about those roses bothered me. They looked too real, too alive, like they might be growing right out of the wood. I brought it to my office at the museum first, wanting to check it out carefully before taking it home. Under the bright lights, I saw things I'd missed at the house sale. The roses weren't just carved. They were part of some weird machine connected to the music part. And hidden in the thorny vines were tiny faces, their looks somewhere between joy and pain. When I turned the key, it fought against me, like something inside didn't want to be wound up. The song that played was like nothing I'd ever heard. The music started soft, like a church organ playing underwater. Not the light, pretty sound you'd expect from a music box, but something deeper, older. Notes that you felt in your bones more than your ears. It reminded me of funeral songs and old rituals that should be left alone. But something about it pulled me in. Between the notes, I could hear whispers, voices speaking in languages no one's spoken for hundreds of years. I found myself leaning closer, trying to understand. That's when I saw the roses moving. Not just shifting with the machine, actually growing. Their wooden petals opening like real flowers, blooming super fast. The faces hidden in the vines started moving too, their looks changing, their mouths opening in silent screams or songs. My helper Mike found me there hours later, still staring at the box. The room was freezing cold. We could see our breath in the air. The roses had gone back into the wood, the faces still again, but the song was stuck in my head, playing over and over. "Dr. Miller?" Mike's voice seemed to come from far away. "It's past 9. You've been here all day." I'd lost 6 hours, but it felt like minutes. My fingers were covered in tiny cuts I didn't remember getting, like paper cuts from rose thorns, just like Mrs. Fletcher's hands. That night, the dreams started. Not normal dreams, but real, clear visions of everyone who'd owned the box before. I watched them waste away one by one, their life draining into that wooden box. I saw Mrs. Fletcher's grandmother in 1887 Vienna getting the box as a wedding gift. Watched her change over months as the music took over until she was just an empty shell, trapped inside those wooden roses. I saw the box passed from person to person through the years, each one pulled in by the song, each one adding their voice to its twisted music. Some tried to destroy it. Some tried to bury it. Some tried to warn others. But it always found its way to someone new. I woke up to find deep cuts on my neck where a wooden rose had grown while I slept. Somehow the box had moved from my bedside table to my pillow. But when I tried to move it, my fingers wouldn't listen. It was like my body wasn't mine anymore. Then the whispers started getting clearer. Ancient voices telling secrets about old things in my museum. They're real stories, the blood spells and dark rituals that made them. Things no history book could know. "Just a taste," they'd say between notes of that haunting song. "Just give us a small piece of yourself, and we'll show you everything." My friend at work, Dr. Chen, noticed the change in me first. "Sarah, your reports about these old items. Where did you learn all this?" I couldn't tell her that voices were showing me visions of old temples, of secret rituals in dead languages. Couldn't explain how I now knew the real uses of things we'd been wrong about for years. Then my body started changing. My skin felt different, dry and tight, like old paper. The cuts on my hands wouldn't heal, and sometimes I thought I saw wood fibers under my torn skin. When I looked in mirrors, my face looked wrong, like it was slowly being carved into something else. The box's power spread through my apartment. My plants died, like something was sucking the life out of them. My cat, Luna, disappeared for 3 days. When she finally came back, she wouldn't stop hissing at the box. and at me. I tried looking up the box's history in the museum's old files, found stories about a strange craftsman in 1800s Vienna who made music boxes that could catch the spirit of life itself. He disappeared after making just 7 boxes, each one made from a tree that grew on old burial grounds. But the more I learned, the stronger its hold on me got. The song played in my head all the time now, even when the box was closed. I caught myself humming it during meetings, and anyone who heard it would go into a weird trance, drawn to the box like moths to a flame. One night, I woke up standing in my study, blood dripping from my fingers onto the box's roses. They were drinking it, the wooden petals moving with each drop. And in the brass pieces, I could see faces, my face, mixed with all the others it had taken over the years. "Almost ready," the whispers said. "Almost part of us. Just one more note to add to our song." That's when I saw the pattern. 7 boxes, 7 notes in a song, 7 parts of something bigger. My box was just one piece. In my dreams, I started hearing other boxes calling to each other across the world, their songs getting stronger as they got closer together. I tried everything to get rid of it. Locked it in the museum safe, but it showed up on my bedroom table that night. Buried it in the woods, only to find it sitting on my kitchen counter next morning, still covered in dirt. Tried to burn it, but the flames wouldn't touch it. Instead, they made shapes like dancing people, moving to the beat of that endless song. The worst was when I threw it into Lake Michigan. As it sank, I heard hundreds of screams coming from the water, all the voices it had caught over the years crying out together. That night, I woke up to find my bedroom flooded with ice-cold water, the box sitting in the middle of the room playing its song. But now the song had the sounds of drowning in it. My body was changing faster. Wood patterns spread under my skin like veins. My joints creaked like old hinges. Sometimes when I talked, my voice came out as music box notes. Then came the night I found the 7th box. I was working late at the museum when I heard it, a song I knew coming from our new items room. Another music box, this one carved with pictures of dancing dead people, had just arrived from Vienna. When the 2 boxes were in the same room, their songs matched up. The roses on both boxes grew huge, their thorns reaching out like hungry fingers. The faces in the wood started singing with real human voices. Hundreds of them, thousands, all the souls they'd caught performing a song of the damned. Between their songs, I finally understood the truth. These boxes weren't just taking souls, they were pieces of a key to unlock something that had been locked away hundreds of years ago, something that could only be freed by trapped souls singing together in perfect, painful harmony. Within a week, the other 5 boxes showed up at the museum, each one mysteriously found and given to us. Each had different carvings, but the same living roses, the same tortured faces. As they came together, the song got stronger, more complex. The air in the room got thick with the sound of countless trapped souls singing in words that made my ears bleed. My change got faster. Tree-like patches spread across my skin. My fingers grew long like twigs, perfect for turning the box's keys. I could feel myself becoming part of their song, not just hearing the music, but being written into it. The last night, during a blood-red moon, all 7 boxes started playing at once. Their song twisted the world itself. The museum walls rippled like water, and through them stepped what looked like a man, or something pretending to be one, the craftsman who'd made the boxes. But he wasn't human, never had been. His body was made of twisted wood and black metal, his face a moving mix of all the faces his boxes had caught. When he spoke, it was with thousands of voices. My orchestra is finally complete. He told me how 7 holy people had trapped him here centuries ago, each taking a piece of him and locking it in a box. How he'd turned their trap against them, using the boxes to catch souls, growing stronger through years of human suffering. Each box was a different note in the song that would break his chains and open a door to somewhere else. "And you, Sarah," he said, reaching for me with fingers made of thorny vines. "You'll be my conductor." The boxes floated into the air, making a circle. Their roses grew and twisted together, making a throne of wooden thorns. The screaming faces in them all turned to watch me, their mouths moving in that terrible song. I could feel the last bits of my human self slipping away, my blood turning to tree sap, my bones to old wood. The song was reaching its highest point, reality cracking around us like ice. That's when Mrs. Fletcher appeared in the doorway, holding an 8th box, one made of white wood, its roses carved with protecting symbols, one the craftsman hadn't known about. "My grandmother wasn't his victim," Mrs. Fletcher said, her voice steady even though her hands shook. "She was his jailer, the last of the 7 holy people. She knew he'd try again, knew the boxes would find each other, so she made a counter song." She opened the white box. The sound that came out was pure and bright, like morning church bells. It cut through the dark song, making the craftsman's body flicker and twist. The roses on him started to die. "No!" His voice was 1,000 screams at once. "The song must finish!" "Sarah," Mrs. Fletcher called out, "the boxes need someone to lead their song. They'll take anyone who works with old things. You have to choose which song to lead." The craftsman reached for me with his thorny hands. "Think about the secrets they showed you, the power. Pick my song." But now I could see the truth in his twisting body. All the endless pain of the souls he'd caught, the years of torture frozen in one endless moment of suffering. I chose Mrs. Fletcher's song. The white box's music grew stronger, weaving through the dark song like strands of light. My knowledge of old things helped me guide it, finding weak spots in the craftsman's music. One by one, the 7 black boxes started to fail, their roses dying, their metal parts turning to dust. The craftsman's scream as he melted away sounded like a whole orchestra being ripped apart. The black boxes burst into sawdust, letting go of hundreds of trapped souls in one beautiful, bright moment before they faded away. But I didn't win completely. Every old thing I touch now carries an echo of that dark song. I catch myself humming it sometimes, and plants still die at my touch. My fingers are still a bit too long, too wooden, and in the right light, you can still see faces moving under my skin. Mrs. Fletcher's box sits in my office now, playing its good song whenever the other 6 try to form again from the museum's dust. Some nights, I still hear them. The start of that dark song trying to build itself again, note by terrible note. Walking with the dead. Let me tell you about Ryan Cooper, a 32-year-old night guard at Oak Hill Cemetery in small-town Massachusetts. After 6 years of quiet nights watching over 200 years of graves, he found out why the old burial ground was marked off limits. What he saw that night changed how he saw both life and death. Here's Ryan's scary story in his own words. Most people think cemeteries are scary at night, but after 6 years working nights at Oak Hill, I'd grown to love the peace. Just me, my coffee, and 2 centuries of history under my feet. Sure, the old workers had stories about the poor people's field, that forgotten spot where they buried unnamed bodies in the 1800s. But I never believed in ghost stories. until they started the new project. The cemetery board wanted to use the empty land next to the poor people's field. Space was running out in the nice parts, and land in Massachusetts doesn't come cheap. The work crew showed up on a Monday in October. By Wednesday, they'd found something that should have stayed buried. First day of digging, they hit something strange about 20 feet down, a sealed stone room. It wasn't on any cemetery maps or in any old records. The room's walls had carvings that made the workers uneasy, symbols that seemed to move when you looked right at them, patterns that hurt your eyes if you stared too long. The project boss called it a historic find and stopped everything for experts to look at it. But old Joe, who'd taken care of Oak Hill for 40 years, had a different reaction. "They've found the counting house," he whispered to me during shift change. His hands shook as he lit his cigarette. "Where they kept the ones that wouldn't stay dead." Before I could ask what he meant, the air changed. It's hard to explain, like the air itself got thicker, heavier, like trying to breathe underwater. The normal night sounds, crickets, far-off cars, wind in the trees, all went quiet. Even my footsteps seemed muffled, like something was eating the sound. That first night after they found the room, during my 3 a.m. walk around, I saw movement between the graves. At first, I thought it was fog coming in from the lake behind the cemetery. But fog doesn't move like that, doesn't crawl on all fours, doesn't have arms and legs that bend the wrong way, doesn't turn to look at you with dozens of eyes peering through dirty bandages. My flashlight beam went right through it like it was made of smoke. But its footprints in the wet grass were real. Deep marks that smoked slightly, like its touch was burning the earth itself. I tried calling backup on my radio, but all I got was static and what sounded like whispering in some old language. That's when I saw more shapes rising from the dug-up ground around the stone room. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each one different, but all wrong. Bodies twisted in ways bodies shouldn't bend. Faces that weren't quite human. They were gathering in a circle around the open room. Through gaps between their moving forms, I could see the stone seal was cracking, black liquid seeping through the cracks. A deep, rhythmic chanting started, not coming from the creatures, but seeming to come from the earth itself. One of them spoke, its voice like rocks being crushed. "The seal is breaking. The counter comes. They're returning. All of them." Old Joe had tried to warn us. The counting house wasn't just a room, it was a prison. In the 1800s, they used Oak Hill's poor field for more than just unclaimed bodies. It was where they buried things that wouldn't stay dead, things that had to be counted and kept in. The stone seal exploded upward with a sound like a giant bell being struck underground. The chanting got louder, and that black liquid started flowing faster, moving against gravity, making patterns in the air that hurt to look at. From the room came something that broke all rules of what's possible. Imagine looking at a hole cut in reality, a piece of nothing that somehow had teeth and eyes. So many eyes. Each one showed a different death that had happened in the poor field. Each eye was like a tiny window into another moment someone died. "The Night Watcher," it said, its voice making my ears bleed. "Come, help us count the dead. We have so many new numbers to add." The thing moved, like time itself was broken, each move leaving trails of other moves behind it. As it came closer, I saw what it really was. A mass of twisted moments. A thing made from all the deaths it had collected. "Such poor record-keeping," it went on, speaking with hundreds of voices at once. "All these unmarked graves, all these uncounted deaths. We are the final counters, and every death must be added up. The thing reached for me with arms that bent through spaces that shouldn't exist. Where it touched the air, reality itself seemed to ripple and tear. "Do you know why they picked this land for the poor field?" it asked, all its eyes blinking one after another. "Because it was already ours. This ground has always been a counting house. The native people knew. The first settlers knew. Everyone who passed through here added to our count." The other things were moving closer now, their wrong feet leaving smoking prints in the grass. The big one from the room opened what I think was its main mouth, a hole filled with swirling colors that shouldn't exist. "We count them all," it said. "The remembered and forgotten, the marked and unmarked, the buried and unburied. But our list needs balance. For each death counted, a life must be added to the total." That's when I understood what was happening in town. The missing person reports that started after they broke the seal. The strange way people near the cemetery were acting. How some people moved wrong, like their bodies were being controlled by something that didn't know how humans should move. "Your neighbors have been helping us count," it said, reading my thoughts. "Each one adds new numbers to our list. But we need someone who knows this place, someone who walks among the dead, a proper counter." Behind it, I could see the black liquid forming shapes, books made of darkness, their pages filled with endless lists of names and dates. Some were written in languages older than people. "Look," it ordered, and I saw the truth. Every grave in Oak Hill was connected by threads of that dark liquid, making a huge math problem of death. The poor field wasn't just a graveyard. It was the total of all death in the area, a problem that had been working itself out for hundreds of years. I ran. Behind me, that huge bell sound hit again, and I heard thousands of graves cracking open at once. The ground itself seemed to be working out some huge death math, each headstone a piece in an impossible problem. Made it to my car just as the first wave of things reached the cemetery gates. Through my mirror, I saw them spreading into the night, moving like a dark flood into the sleeping town. Each one carried a book made of shadows, ready to add new names to their endless count. They never found my relief guard, or the work crew that came the next morning. The poor field is officially closed now, marked as unsafe ground. But we all know that's not why. I drive past sometimes, during the day when I feel brave. The stone room is sealed up again, the graves look normal. But the town's different now. People go missing more often. Strange sounds echo through the streets at night, like pencils writing on paper, like numbers being whispered in ancient languages. The worst part is what I've become. I see the math now, everywhere I go. Every person I pass has a number floating above their head. Not how long they have to live, but their value in the huge death equation. Some numbers are plus, others minus, all feeding into some final sum I can't understand. I've started keeping my own count. Can't help it. The numbers demand to be written. Sometimes I wake up to find pages of math in my own handwriting. Dates, times, places of deaths I couldn't possibly know about. My fingers are always stained with ink that looks a lot like that black liquid. Last week, I found a note written in my book in handwriting that looked like twisted numbers. The count goes on. "You're one of our counters now. Every death must be added. Every life must be balanced. The problem must be solved." Yesterday, I finally understood what the math is building to. In my book, under thousands of names and dates, I saw it. The final answer. A number so big and terrible, it cracked my mind just trying to understand it. It's not just counting deaths, it's figuring out something bigger. When their math problem reaches its answer, When enough souls have been added to balance the dark books, something will happen. Something those things in the poor field have been working toward since before people first walked this earth. The numbers showed me glimpses. A future where the line between life and death disappears completely. Where the counting house grows to cover everything. Where all of reality becomes one huge book of endless counting. I tried burning my book last night. The pages wouldn't catch fire. Instead, the flames made numbers, counting down the seconds until my own death. I tried throwing it away, but it showed up on my desk this morning, with new entries added in that twisted number handwriting. Sometimes I catch my reflection writing in the book even when I'm not moving. My shadow makes numbers on the wall, and at night I hear them. The counters from the poor field, moving through town with their shadow books, adding to their total one soul at a time. The missing person reports keep coming, but what's worse are the people who come back. They look the same, walk the same, talk the same, but their eyes are full of math, and their shadows are made of numbers. I found a new entry in my book this morning, my own name followed by a date. Not a death date, but something worse. The day I'll become a full counter, when the last bit of my human self will be added to their math. So if you're ever driving past Oak Hill Cemetery at night, and you see shapes moving between the graves with books made of darkness, don't stop. Don't look too close at the numbers floating in the air. And if you start seeing math where there shouldn't be any, pray you don't become part of their final answer. If these real scary stories kept you up tonight, hit subscribe for more true horror stories. And remember, check your shadows, stay away from old graves, and whatever you do, don't try to add up the numbers you might start seeing in the dark. Sleep tight if you dare.